They gave her to him as if she were a punishment, as if she were a burden no one else was willing to carry, as if her existence itself was something to be ashamed of, and the entire docking hall of the interstellar station fell into a quiet, uncomfortable silence when the announcement was made, because everyone knew what it meant when a human male was assigned an alien companion from the outer colonies, especially one labeled in official records as genetically undesirable, socially incompatible, high-risk emotional profile, which in simpler words meant ugly, unstable, and unwanted. And yet when the doors of the containment chamber finally opened and she stepped out into the sterile white light, what struck people first wasn't just her appearance but the way she held herself, tense and guarded, as if expecting rejection before anyone even spoke. Her skin uneven in texture with shifting hues that didn't settle into any one color, her eyes too large and slightly asymmetrical, glowing faintly with a bioluminescent flicker that made direct eye contact uncomfortable for most species, and a subtle ridge along her jawline that marked her as part of a lesser-regarded genetic branch of her kind, one often associated with aggression and emotional instability, and whispers immediately spread through the crowd, low and cruel, some mocking, some pitying, but most simply relieved that she wasn't their assignment, and at the center of it all stood the human man. Captain Elias Varn, known across several systems not for his rank alone but for his calm under pressure and his refusal to treat alien species with the usual detached superiority that many humans had developed after decades of interstellar expansion. And when the officer in charge handed him the file and said in a flat, almost dismissive tone that this was his assigned partner under the Interspecies Integration Program, Elias didn't immediately respond, didn't show surprise or frustration, didn't ask for a reassignment like many others would have. He simply looked at the alien woman standing a few meters away, watching her carefully, not with judgment but with curiosity, and for a brief moment their eyes met. And in that moment she expected the same reaction she had seen countless times before, disgust, avoidance, or at best forced politeness, but instead she saw something unfamiliar in his expression, something steady, something unafraid, and it confused her more than any insult could have, because she didn't understand why he wasn't reacting the way everyone else did, why he wasn't turning away, and the officer cleared his throat, clearly expecting resistance, even ready to process a formal complaint, but Elias simply closed the file and said, "All right," as if he had just been given any ordinary assignment, and that single word echoed louder than any protest would have, because it broke the expectation everyone had built around the moment. And the alien woman, whose name was Zyra, felt something shift inside her, not trust, not hope, but something small and fragile that she didn't yet recognize. And from that moment forward, everything began to change, though not in ways either of them fully understood at first, because living together on a deep space vessel designed for long-range missions meant constant proximity, constant interaction, and constant exposure to each other's habits, flaws, and unspoken thoughts. And at first their conversations were minimal, functional, limited to mission-related exchanges, because Zyra didn't know how to act around someone who wasn't openly rejecting her, and Elias didn't push for familiarity, instead giving her space, respecting her boundaries in a way that felt deliberate rather than indifferent, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, patterns began to form, small routines that built a fragile sense of normalcy between them, shared meals where silence wasn't uncomfortable, maintenance tasks completed side by side without tension, occasional exchanges that went beyond necessity, and each of these moments chipped away at the walls Zyra had built around herself over years of rejection and isolation, though she resisted it at first, questioning his intentions, wondering if his kindness was temporary, conditional, or simply a human trait she didn't yet understand, because in her experience kindness always came with a cost, always faded, always turned into disappointment, and her species, particularly those of her genetic line, were often labeled as overly emotional, prone to jealousy and possessiveness due to heightened neural sensitivity, traits that made them difficult to integrate into structured societies. And Zyra had spent most of her life being moved from one facility to another, studied, evaluated, and ultimately dismissed, never allowed to form lasting connections because she was considered too unstable, too reactive, too much, and those labels had shaped her perception of herself, to the point where she expected failure in every relationship before it even began. And so when she started noticing that Elias treated her consistently, without sudden shifts, without hidden contempt, it unsettled her more than rejection ever had, because it forced her to confront the possibility that her assumptions might not always be true, and that possibility was both terrifying and intoxicating. And as weeks turned into months, their dynamic evolved in subtle but meaningful ways. Conversations became more personal, trust began to form in small increments, and Zaira found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, studying the way he interacted with others, the way he handled stress, the way he remained steady even in unpredictable situations, and she couldn't understand why someone like him, someone respected, capable, and clearly valued by his own kind, would accept someone like her without hesitation, without complaint, and that question lingered in her mind until one day during a routine system check, when the ship was quiet and the stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, she finally asked him directly, her voice hesitant but firm, "Why didn't you refuse?" And Elias paused, considering the question as if it deserved a thoughtful answer rather than a quick dismissal, and then he looked at her and said, "Because you're not a problem to solve, Zaira. You're a person." And the simplicity of that statement hit her harder than anything else he had said before, because it contradicted everything she had been taught about herself, everything she had been labeled as. And for a moment she didn't know how to respond, didn't know how to process the weight of those words, and something inside her shifted again, deeper this time, more significant, like a crack forming in the foundation of her self-perception. And from that point on her behavior began to change in ways even she didn't fully notice at first. Her defensive reactions softened, her trust grew stronger, her tendency toward jealousy, once a defining trait, became less intense as she no longer felt the constant threat of being replaced or rejected. And Elias noticed these changes but never pointed them out directly, never made them into conditions or expectations. He simply continued treating her with the same steady respect, allowing her to grow at her own pace, and their bond deepened naturally, evolving into something neither of them had planned but both began to rely on, a connection built not on obligation but on mutual understanding. And it was during one of their missions, a high-risk operation near an unstable star system, that this connection was truly tested, when a sudden energy surge disrupted the ship systems, sending it into a partial shutdown that left critical functions offline and navigation compromised. And in the chaos that followed, with alarms blaring and systems failing, Zaira's instincts kicked in, her heightened sensitivity allowing her to detect fluctuations others couldn't. And she moved with a level of focus and precision that surprised even herself, coordinating with Elias to stabilize the ship, making split-second decisions that ultimately prevented a catastrophic failure. And in that moment, under pressure, without the weight of labels or expectations, she proved something that no evaluation report ever had, that she wasn't broken or undesirable. She was capable, valuable, and essential. And when the crisis was over and the ship returned to stable operation, the crew looked at her differently, not with pity or discomfort but with respect, and Elias, standing beside her, simply nodded as if to say that he had known this all along. And for Zaira, that acknowledgement meant more than any official recognition could, because it came from someone who had seen her not as she was labeled, but as she truly was. And as time passed, their bond continued to grow, evolving into a partnership that transcended the original assignment, becoming something deeper, something chosen rather than imposed. And though the universe around them remained vast and unpredictable, filled with challenges and uncertainties, they faced it together, not as a human and an unwanted alien, but as two individuals who had found understanding in a place where neither had expected it. And in the end, the story that began as an act of rejection, of giving the ugliest and most jealous alien woman to a human man as if she were a burden, became something entirely different. A story of acceptance, growth, and connection, proving that sometimes the things the world discards are the very things that, when given a chance, can redefine what it means to belong.